Hello, I'm Debbie Bell-Hosking for FinextraTV, and I'm joined by Mark Barnett of Mastercard and Alexa von Bismarck of Adyen, and we're talking about online checkout and payment security. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
This is a really interesting topic because it involves each of us, because most of us are shopping online. It's a balancing act, is it not, between consumer experience and security. So I'm going to come to you first, if I may, Mark. How are you approaching this?
Well, of course it is a balancing act, and what's really important to consumers, people don't go out in the morning thinking, I'm going to pay for something. They go out to buy something, a service or a product, whatever, and what they're really concerned about is that it's going to be simple and it's going to be secure. So those two things, and the balance is there. Years ago, we had issues with physical payments, and we invented chip and pin or tap and pin, or now the ability to use a device to pay in store. Online is hugely important because by some reports 40% of all shopping is going to be online in 4 or 5 years time, but also that's where most of the security issues sit. So there's a lot of things we've done. I'll probably talk about it a bit later, and I'm sure Alexa will as well. The main thing is something called tokenization, where we don't actually have the real card number floating around the internet when we're doing e-commerce. We have something called a token, which is a number that can only be used once, and everybody wins because it makes the whole ecosystem a lot more secure.
Thank you. And I love the way you've described tokenization there. That really landed with me, so thank you for that. And Alexa, what are your thoughts, especially in this digital landscape we are in? How are you dealing with the balancing act?
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's a continuous balancing act. It's not, you're never done, right? It's a moving target a bit. And what we see at the moment are 4 main trends. We see that mobile is really on the rise. 70% of transactions happen on mobile devices. We see that regulation is increasing. We've had that in Europe for a long time with PSD2, now moving towards PSD3. We see fraud on the rise, so that also is a moving target for customers and businesses. And we see the rise in the expectations of shoppers. They want a very frictionless experience, and they will drop off if they don't get that. So there's a lot happening in the market that we need to help our customers to cater to. And as Mark already said, tokenization is one of the foundational things that merchants can take on and implement to make that experience much nicer.
In fact, just building on that, we published a vision recently for a world of 100% tokenization by the end of this decade, by 2030. And that would mean that there's no real card numbers anywhere in the ecosystem. So at the moment, if you shop online, it might be that you've stored your card with a merchant. I have with lots of supermarkets here and in Belgium. And if that merchant has a data breach, then there's a problem because there's a real card number that can be obtained. If it's a secure card on file or a tokenized card on file, then that data breach is completely useless to the criminal. So, the merchant benefits because they don't have to worry about this thing. It's safer for the consumer, and the issuer will have less fraud. So sort of everybody wins in this world of tokenization, which is why we set out that vision for by 2030 for a fully tokenized ecosystem.
When you talk about this tokenization, it almost sounds like a one-time PIN in a way, the way it works.
Yeah, it is a bit like that. I mean, really, you're creating a proxy for the actual card number. We can link it back to the card number, but we don't need to put the card number in the actual system. It's the same when you use a device, as Alexa said. A lot of people are now using devices for e-com shopping and physical shopping. When you use it physically, that's a token as well. So more and more, we're seeing the tokenization of the ecosystem, which generates a great deal more security and I would say convenience as well. I mean, for example, if you lose your card, and get a replacement card, that's updated in your that's updated immediately with all the merchants that are using tokenization technology, rather than you having to go in and replace the card manually. So there are benefits all round.
Now we're talking about benefits, we're talking about changes, we're talking about also expectations changing. So if I can come to you, please, Alexa, how do the key players in the industry meet these topics we're talking about now, at the same time have a healthy mix between experience and security?
Well, what matters to our customers are their shoppers or their consumers in the end. And we see that today. Research shows that 48% of shoppers consider abandoning their shopping cart if the experience is bad. And that could be bad because it's not the right payment method, because there's friction, because the authentication doesn't work. So different reasons. So there's in itself a strong need for merchants to close that gap and make sure that they've got a seamless experience. But we look at it even more as, the data security and the experience, that's basic hygiene that every customer or merchant should be doing. But you also enable much more with it. If you think about a merchant like Nespresso, we work with them in a couple of markets. You can go into the shop, buy a machine, and then when you tap your card, you tokenize it, and you immediately enter into a subscription for your capsules. So it's not about just a single transaction. You turn those customers into relationships as a merchant. So there's a huge incentivization for merchants to embrace this. And there are other things. It's cross-channel journeys. Where do you shop? Where do you return things in store? It's things like card-linked loyalty. So there's a lot in it for customers and shoppers in the end, and that is why we feel there's quite a push and momentum in the industry to move forward.
And would you like to add to that at all?
Yeah, I think it's always true in payments that it's an ecosystem. We have merchants, we have acquirers and gateways and PSPs and payment facilitators. We have schemes such as ourselves. We have issuing banks or issuers in general. And so all those players need a motivation to make something happen. Without the right economics and without the right products and without the right security, all those players won't work together to deliver the payments to consumers. That's the last bit I hadn't mentioned. Consumers, the most important constituency in that whole ecosystem, because unless we all have an incentive to do something together, we're not going to move as an industry together. And I think when we talk about online shopping and the security and the balance between security and convenience, that's something that I'm pleased to say as an industry we've all got a common interest in, and so we're all moving towards this new world of tokenization.
And if I may add, I think what's interesting here is that also regulation helped with that significantly. If you think about strong customer authentication, the new way of authenticating with biometrics, no longer passwords and clunky redirects. So I think there's a lot happening also because of that regulatory change.
And you mentioned biometrics and so on. One of the big initiatives that we're driving at the moment is something called something called Click to Pay. And that, one of the pain points for consumers is having to enter a 16-digit card number and an expiry date and maybe a delivery address and all sorts of things on a little phone. Now, if you've got your card on file, secure card, that's fine, so you don't have to do that. But if you don't, if it's a merchant you don't go to that often, maybe you don't have your card on file. So Click to Pay makes sure that you don't have to go through that complex checkout process, which will lead to the cart abandonment that Alexa talked about. And also, we combine that with something called pass keys, and then you have biometrics included in the click-to-pay checkout journey, and suddenly we're in a whole new world of convenience and security for consumers. So that's a direction we're going in. We're not there yet, but it's something we're very, very, very interested in.
The new direction, you talk about how everyone has to work together. So Mark, if I just stay with you briefly, could you just tell us how adoption is going and what needs to be done to make this mainstream?
So look, tokenization is a huge success. It's growing very rapidly. I think we've seen a 50% increase on last year. I think we've tokenized over 100 billion transactions. And given that we process 143 billion transactions a year, that's quite a lot tokenized. I'm talking. So I think we tokenize about 20 billion transactions a year. So it's a great growth story. Click to Pay is going to help with that bit, which is guest checkout. The adoption of tokenization for e-commerce is increasing rapidly all the time with the help of partners like Adyen. And also, every time you use a device to pay in store, that's a tokenized transaction as well. So we really are seeing, we've gone past that sort of early part of the hockey stick, and we're probably halfway up it.
Right, well, I'm going to come to you now, please, Alexa. We're talking about that hockey stick. We're halfway up. Where do you see us when we get to the top of the hockey stick? What do you see in the future in the next 5 years? And also, you mentioned cart abandonment earlier. Do you think that could become a thing of the past?
Well, answering the cart abandonment first, I think what we owe our customers is to ensure that the cart abandonment is not happening because of a bad experience and not because of expired cards. So that those, problems that we can control, we change. And what we see in the future is we'll see a lot more customers accepting tokenization, and a larger push to making sure that stays with the security protocols that are needed.
And where do you see us in 5 years' time?
Well, hopefully in a fully tokenized world. If I look at Mark and I think their goal of 2030, I think we should be getting there. We're working towards that. But obviously always the customer at heart and making sure that they can service their consumers in the best possible way.
I saw this great graphic in a presentation, it was a few years ago, and it was an actual shopping trolley, a supermarket shopping trolley full of goods, abandoned, just left in the store. And you never see that, do you? No. I don't think I've ever seen that, somebody who's filled up a trolley and then abandoned it. But in the e-commerce world, it's a reality, and hopefully it's a reality that will come to an end at some point.
Great, thank you. That's a good image to stick with, and hopefully that'll be gone in the future. So thank you both, Mark and Alexa. Great chatting to you, and it's been really interesting, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.